Hey there, I'm Anthony Romano, and this video is going to be on nuts on keto. So this was a heavily requested video, and it's one that I didn't think I'd have to make, but I'm making it, and I feel like it actually is going to be a pretty damn useful video. So watch it, but before you watch it, subscribe to me, like the video, and follow me on Instagram. And also stay tuned for programs dropping. I have certain programs on optimizing a keto diet for health, for lifestyle, for all purposes, and it includes topics like this, like are nuts something that is optimal to have, things of that nature, certain food choices you should be making to have an optimal and balanced keto lifestyle, and other ways to optimize it for further mental capacity, for better workout performance, things of that nature. And the book on that is Keto Pro Start, which is not out yet, but it will be out soon. So let's get into the video. Okay, so this video is going to be basically me breaking down the different categories, and I'm going to start off with the best, the next best, the next best, and then the worst, and going through it in that sort of systematic style. And I'm going to also tell you the 4 keys that you need to know to vet the quality of every nut, so that you basically can always know, hey, this is probably a healthier choice given the context of your life. So, at the top, we probably have
these nuts. Got him!
Look, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I didn't add a D's nuts joke in the first minute of this video. Okay, I'm a child, I know. The best nuts are going to be walnuts, macadamias, perhaps pecans, but I'll get into that in a second. Macadamias and walnuts being the best. Up there with them, you could also make a case for Brazil nuts, you could also make a case for pistachios, but those 2 nuts, there's a lot of debate because you could make a case that, you know, pistachios might be more prone to mold toxins. You could make the case that Brazil nuts can raise DHT a little bit, and that's linked to male pattern baldness. DHT is a form of testosterone in the body. So there's lots of different debate, but this video is not about the little micro details and nuances. It's about simply telling you, hey, these are the worst kinds of nuts, these are the better kinds. Okay? Not necessarily that we have an exact hierarchy of this is first place, second place, third place, fourth place, but you're going to know what's better and what's worse. So let's get back into this. We have macadamias, walnuts, perhaps Brazil nuts, perhaps pistachios. Middle tier, we have probably almonds. The lower tiers, we have peanuts and cashews. I know they're technically a legume, I think, but people think of them as nuts. So that's generally the hierarchy, and here are the 4 categories you're going to want to test each of them with. So number 1, you're going to want to look at the omega-6 content of the nut. Now granted, all nuts are going to have higher omega-6. So what the hell is omega-6? Omega-6 is the inflammatory fat, and omega-3 is the anti-inflammatory fat. Now granted, omega-7, omega-9, they can be also inflammatory, but it depends on the specific fat, and this video is simply letting you know that nuts tend to be higher in omega-6, and certain nuts are higher in omega-6, and you never want to have too much omega-6. Now granted, we need omega-6, okay? It's an essential fatty acid, and if you sprain your ankle, you're going to need omega-6 to help inflame the area so your body can heal it, and there's a certain amount of inflammation that is good. Generally, apparently our evolutionary history is that humans had about an equal amount, 1-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, but a lot of our food nowadays is way higher in omega-6, and that's a reason why it can be problematic to overdo certain nuts, okay? And a lot of people tend to think of nuts as a healthy fat, but they really are, you're kind of playing with fire a little bit, depending on the nut. And so let's get back to the omega-6. Omega-6 is inflammatory. If you have too much nuts, you're going to increase your omega-6, and that's not optimal. So again, that's another reason why you would probably want to have a moderate amount, besides the obvious calorie implications that nuts are higher in fat and they can put your calories over and you can, you know, gain fat. All those reasons aside. So we're talking about the health of each nut here. So omega-6 quantity is number 1. Number 2 is the quality of the production. So the quality of the production, if there's a propensity of mold toxins based on how it was produced. So that's basically mold toxins, but I'm going to call it production quality because a lot of things like cashews are produced through slave labor, and 90% of the cashews on store shelves are going to have mold toxins. And I mean, if you want a good research source on this, there's even the bulletproof head honcho Dave Asprey has made an entire documentary on mold toxins, and a lot of these nuts can have higher amounts of mold toxin. So particularly cashews, but I'll get to that in a moment. So omega-6 production quality / mold toxins or other toxins that would make it in through the production. And then also we're going to be looking at anti-nutrients, and basically anti-nutrients are going to be phytic acid, oxalate, salicylate. Basically what anti-nutrients are is they are compounds that leach minerals out of your body, and they are plant defense mechanisms in a certain way because they'll either deter a predator from eating the plant or they will cause problems for the animal that eats it. So plants want to live just as much as you and I do, and essentially anti-nutrients are naturally occurring in foods like legumes or nuts because they're not something that humans are sustaining themselves off of entirely. If you think about a seed, okay, so seeds are an example of another food that is very high omega-6, and they're basically almost zero nutritional benefit, with the exception of some really good ones like psyllium husk, which is very useful for gastrointestinal regulation, and I'm a big fan of it actually, especially with cooking and baking and whatnot, have some sort of GI regulator. But a lot of seeds are problematic because of the same reasons legumes and nuts would be, which is example with seeds. Those anti-nutrients preserve the shell of a seed so that it can pass through your digestive tract without getting destroyed, and then eventually you can shit it out and it's already planted. A plant has already planted its offspring in fertilizer, because that's what human waste is. So there's other evolutionary logical reasons for these anti-nutrients to be in foods, and even though nuts aren't trying to procreate or produce offspring, some legumes or nuts will have these compounds in them, and that is another reason why, example, even with overnight oats, people are soaking them to get rid of the phytic acid content. With almonds, there's a large amount of phytic acid in the shell, and I mean, granted, almond milk probably won't have as much of that, but you can make a case that the mold toxin might get in through the basically almond water is what it is. But I don't really think that's an issue. So anyways, back to the hierarchy of nuts. Those are 3 categories. And the fourth one, I mean, I was going to get into breaking down the production more, but I think 3 is good enough for 3 characteristics to vet the nuts for. So, I mean, the fourth one could be polyunsaturated fats as well, because not all nuts are composed of the same fatty acid composition. However, overdoing polyunsaturated and linoleic acid can be a problem. It can cause weight gain, and overall, there's also some research that it can cause problems for blood sugar regulation, and I know with my clients I've worked with, that's been an issue. But let's go back to the hierarchy, okay? Macadamias, walnuts, perhaps pistachios, perhaps Brazil nuts, and then almonds. The main reason almonds is in the middle is because that phytic acid I was speaking about, and lower is going to be the cashews and peanuts. Now, this is probably the big turning point of the video, because a lot of people know peanuts and cashews and they prefer them or they'll snack on them. Listen, they are the highest in omega-6, and they are the most likely to have mold toxin contamination. And as far as anti-nutrients and omega-6, you're going to look at all these nuts as if they're basically the same. Okay, you're going to look at them and assume they're going to be some omega-6. It's probably not going to be a big deal if you eat a high omega-3 diet and you have high quality foods in place. You get Atlantic fish, you get grass-fed, pasture-raised meat products. If you eat meat, you get organic vegetables if you eat vegetables, okay? Because when I do keto videos, there's so many different types of keto diets, I have to make sure, I'm talking about every kind of food here. But because all that really matters for keto is that you're cutting out carbs. Some people might even go into this and think they have to eat a shitload of fat, and they're throwing peanut butter on everything, okay? You don't have to do that. These are simply foods that you have the luxury of eating as a snack, okay? And back to cashews and peanuts. They're higher in omega-6. You're generally always going to look at a nut and say, okay, it's going to be some omega-6, it's going to be some anti-nutrient, but if you're eating a good diet in general, it's not going to detract from that too much. But with cashews and peanuts, there's definitely going to be a higher amount of mold toxins that might make it in. Cashews, 90% of them, like, that's not a number I pulled from a study, I'm just, generalizing, but you can look up the research on this. Most of them are produced in a manner that will create mold toxin. And there's also a concern for that with pistachios, because pistachios have this little shell, right? And you can make the case that mold and moisture can make it into that shell and then basically come out on the pistachios. So that's another reason why, as much as I love pistachios and I think they're better in terms of their fatty acid composition and their anti-nutrient composition, that's another reason why you might want to take them down a peg. So that's another reason why I can say macadamias and walnuts, which don't have as much of those issues and they have more saturated fat, particularly the macadamias, you're going to have less of the problematic fats, and you're going to have less of the problematic anti-nutrients, and also less of a problematic production environment. So cashews and peanuts are going to be at the bottom. Almonds, the main problem is the phytic acid. And again, do people make shaved almonds? Is that a thing? And if you plant your own cashews or a clean source, that's another way to go about that problem. However, cashews are still probably the highest in omega-6. Don't quote me on that one because I don't research cashews more than I have to. And I looked up a lot of this information years ago when I actually started considering the problems that nuts might pose. So in general, look up if you really want to get deep into exactly how much, you can look up the lower tiers and compare them. But essentially, a lot of these nuts are not going to have that many beneficial fat compounds, perhaps maybe macadamia and walnut. And again, people say, oh, nuts like macadamia and walnut have vitamin E. They certainly will have some vitamin E, but again, this is not something that you're eating nuts for. You shouldn't be going into nuts as if they are a primary nutritional source of sustenance, okay? Macadamias and walnuts can decorate on top of a good nutritional plan, but again, that's where you now should know, I can sprinkle in a bit of pistachios, I can sprinkle in a bit of almonds, but again, you want to be careful and just know that those should be the secondary options here. You should know that the last choice, the last tier, the last resort should be peanuts and cashews, and I would highly recommend getting rid of them. And again, you're going to notice less inflammation, and for a lot of people, this is just anecdotal, better blood sugar regulation when they reduce these high omega-6 nuts, such as cashews, peanuts. Perhaps the reason I theorize might be because of less polyunsaturated and linoleic acid, because that can be not dysregulatory, but I guess the word is scientists haven't determined yet how dysregulatory it is to blood sugar, and basically going to more saturated fat type nuts like macadamias would be a better choice for blood sugar stability. That's a minor concern here. The main takeaway of this video is anytime you eat nuts, you're going to be getting some omega-6. Anytime you eat nuts, you're probably going to get a little bit of anti-nutrient quality, so unless you're low in iron or you're low in a certain mineral, then that would be the only situation where you should avoid those things. Polyunsaturated fats, you're going to get a little bit more, not necessarily a problem. But it is a problem in things like nut butters, where when you are having peanut butter and there's a bunch of polyunsaturated fats, so it's typically going to be hydrogenated oils, which are basically polyunsaturated fats, which are heated up to the point where they become trans fats, and that is where those other types of fats will pose a problem. So if you're having peanut butter, if you're having almond butter, make sure you get natural forms of those things. Make sure you get higher quality forms. Another reason why I wouldn't recommend cashew milk or cashew butter. I'm pretty sure they make cashew butter, right? Because again, not only are those nuts less favorable in and of themselves, almonds not bad, but not only are they less favorable in and of themselves, but because they'll typically be mixed with another oil in there to give it that consistency. And typically those oils are of the less favorable kind, being trans fats, which are hydrogenated oils, which means they are heated up and they basically become unstable chemically. So that's another reason why you don't want to be overdoing the peanut butter, overdoing the cashew butter, right? And probably almond butter too, but you can find these things in natural sources, and that's a better way to go about it. If you get natural peanut butter, you're going to be getting way less inflammatory compounds because trans fats are inherently inflammatory. They are inherently difficult for your body to process, and they're not necessarily in the nuts themselves, but they're in the added ingredients in a nut butter. Okay, so that should pretty much cover everything. I gave you the hierarchy here. I gave you the main characteristics to vet the quality of each nut. And the main takeaway is be careful of certain nuts, especially the most common ones like peanuts and cashews, and choose other nuts sparingly and don't rely on them as a nutritional source. If you are going to rely on them as a nutritional source, the ones that would be better would probably be macadamias and walnuts. And you could dive deeper into the research and figure out if Brazil nuts would be something that you would want to do. But again, that would also maybe be up there. But anyways, that is it for this video. If I left out a nut or something like that, let me know. I'm not a big, consumer of different kinds of nuts. So at the end of the day, I've had all those ones, but there aren't too many other African varieties of nuts or legumes that I've experimented with. At least not that I know of. So that is it for this video. Like the video, subscribe to me, follow me on Instagram, leave me some comments, okay? I would love to help you out, especially if I've maybe left out a detail here, or maybe there's something else I could riff off and help you with. Leave it down below, and also go to my website, romanoketo.com, for help personally if you want somebody to help you be accountable, have the right approach right from the get-go, and get you to your goal within a certain time. That is it. Anthony Romano. Peace.